tax,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a hard thing for them to, even if they are in favor, it's hard for them to side with that because of their constituents. And I use that as an example because constituents do matter. They gave me my job, right? So you're like, do I take a risk? You know, it's tough. Where your entrepreneurs and resorts will say to the Republicans, come on, we want retail, we want hospitality. We'll market, we'll do it, let's do it. And I say that because if you are in a resort area, and Monroe County, I can speak for them, was in favor and one spearheading getting rid of property tax and doing it because of the boom in resorts, water parks, and all these things that are coming. They felt they could generate more money than trying to bleed out property tax because they couldn't get from a lot of the renters and people moving here. The census wasn't up to snuff as well, so it's not accurate on population. And if you're in my area right now, they're knocking on your door and they're reassessing everyone. Why would you reassess? This is a local, yep.
Property values, they fluctuate.
Mhm.
Most times when they do a reassessment means the value of the home is going up, and by proxy, they give more taxes. So it's all just a revenue thing, basically.
Yeah, and depending on which side you fall on, some people benefit from that. Your taxes could actually go down. If a home has increased, but it was assessed here, now it's increasing, the person that's always up here gets a little offset of fairness. The person that's been low assessed hates it because now
Right,
they
yeah.
have to pay more. They were kind of under the radar for a couple of years with the census, population, and also with assessing property in those areas and schools. So they didn't do the numbers. So if I've been hiding kind of like under the radar, I'm like, yes. Or if you're trying to sell your house and you're trying to sell it that you have low taxes, you're like, yes. But then when they reassess, what happens is theirs go up, but the person who's been up here for a while is like, oh, fairness, thank you. So it balances on both sides a little bit. So you either really like it or you really don't, depending on which you're in.
Speaking of taxes, like, I read like articles from like libertarians and stuff,
Mhm.
and they're like, this catchphrase you see a lot is taxation is theft. What is, like, speaking of taxes, like what's their justification for that? Like, why do they?
I mean, I don't wanna speak for them.
No.
Possibly because their whole ideology is less government.
Okay.
So they're looking at it as they wouldn't use a lot of the services that taxes pay for.
Okay.
So you're taking from me constantly and I'm not benefiting from that. So they don't feel there's a say and a balance in
Okay.
that.
No, I was just curious.
Especially if it's a lot of entitlement programs or social services.
Right.
They're more hands-off. Folks can do this on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Community helps each other and market
Mm-hmm.
is usually the ideology.
I got you. No,
I'm
I
a
was just-
libertarian in my household, so I'm going based on what he would say right now.
Yeah, no, that's actually why I asked. I remember you
I have a
saying
strong
that.
libertarian as a spouse, so
Right. Yeah.
that would be his fair assessment.
I got you.
I don't like to speak for folks, and if you're in here as a libertarian, feel free to jump in. You can say, did I do all right? You're going, and you can say it too. And everybody has a different level with that.
Right.
As a libertarian,
Of
just like
course.
Republicans are different levels.
Right.
But the gist of it is always going to be less government interference in my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
They'd like to take the risk on their own.
Okay.
They're very similar in certain areas, especially economic, with Republicans. But they splinter off with certain individual rights, especially foreign policy.
I got you.
Yeah. This just gives you a little bit of history and the evolution of it, as we were talking about. They also wanted, bless you,
Thank you.
balance of power. We went over this before, that instead of one legislative body, they decided through the Great Compromise between the sizes of the states and populations to have two chambers. You want the Senate to represent state to state, no matter what size you are, and then by your population with districts is the House of Representatives. They do the same thing on the state level. They have two chambers. So it mimics it completely. So you have also state senators that are at the state level, and you have representatives in the districts at the state level. And I think that it can be really confusing for folks, and it can make sense for folks. 2 reasons. If you look at the framework, it's the same, so it's easy to remember. Where it gets confusing is if somebody says, that's my state senator, they go, oh, like in DC? No, it's also, you have a state senator. So sometimes it gets blurred when they hear that so-and-so's here and they're a state senator. They don't know if it's federal representing Pennsylvania or in the Pennsylvania Assembly. They're 2 different senators. Same with your representatives. So that's where you want to always clarify. State constitutions, same way your federal does it. You have to do formal changes, you can't just go. Now, your federal government doesn't have to interfere and they don't have to approve of it. But your chambers have to approve of it, and it starts in Congress, just like you would do at the federal level. These are different ways that they would do it. They do have discretion on how they want to handle it, and they can add to it and they can take away. It's easier at the state level if you wanted to ratify, obviously, than your federal. There's more hands involved of different diversity and personalities. You know, all of Pennsylvania, all of New Jersey, it's not always easy, but they have similar interests because it's all one state. So it's a little bit easier. But they go through a process just as you would do at the federal level, that you could ratify, go to convention and have delegates vote. Possibly they'll say, we just want to amend something on a referendum, on a ballot initiative, and that's when you go. And if you voted in, and we have had them in Pennsylvania, you just had one. The presidential election had a lovely paragraph at the top that most people read and bypassed. Because the way it was written was so cumbersome, everybody's like, I don't even know what that means, I'm not touching it, and they go on. Do you know what I'm talking about, when you see these paragraphs and it goes yes or no?
Yep.
And you're like, I don't even know what that means. Vote on that. And then you just bypass it.
That's like in the last election, they had some
It was
referendum.
Supreme Court,
Yeah.
the age for retirement.
Yep.
Changing it, that's all it was changing the age.
And they,
The
but they,
way it was written,
they
nobody
wrote
got
it.
that out of it.
right, right.
Well, they made it seem like the age was being raised, but it was actually being lowered.
Right.
Right, right.
It's the legal jargon gets in the way,
It was
because they're all trying to write this so it doesn't persuade you to say yes or no. So they're trying to write it the best way they can, that everybody just walks away from it what it is, and it doesn't persuade you yes or no. It's not biased. So they're trying to write it, but in the meantime, they confuse the reader completely, because it's so obscure, that everybody ends up going, I'm not even gonna vote for it, or then a lot of them vote the wrong way. It's just like you're saying, it confuses you, and then you end up picking yes or no the wrong way. But a lot of times referendums can be unclear. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, I spent way too long in the booth rereading that question.
On that very question,
It's like taking the SATs while you're in there.
I heard people when they were leaving, because of teaching political science, I'm one of those sick people that loves election day for many reasons, but then I also pick up on behaviors, because I want to take it all in. And I heard so many people go, excuse me, can you come in here? And they were like, I don't know what that means. And they're like, I can only read it to you, but I cannot tell you what it means. And they were like, can you give me a hint? And I felt like somebody was taking a quiz. You know, you take a test with your faculty and you're like, can you like tell me a little? You're still trying to get the answer.
Well, like you're trying not to.
And the faculty members, like, I can only reword or say, they can't even do that.
Yeah.
They can only read it over and over in case somebody, you know, reading comprehension or a disability isn't grasping it. But they're not allowed to tell you what it means in their terms. That's illegal.
You know, with that referendum though, like, because like I feel like we don't like have people covering that stuff all the time anymore in the news. And so like now people like
Yes.
don't know, and that's sort of, you know, that's also part of the problem, you know?
Well, and you have that argument. Nobody's involved in their local or
Right.
state because they don't get coverage.
Right, which is one of the reasons why when that referendum came out, everyone was like, oh, what?
I mean, even with the hurricane, I'm watching the national and they're so generalized that you have to like go in and try to get something else. My parents were on a local news station app watching it on a tablet to see Street by Street in Florida. Because we have a home down there in Fort Myers, which was a direct hit.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's been a long weekend, my family.
I'm sorry.
And it's hard because you're how many states away, you know,
Yeah.
you're 20 hours away. Good luck trying to get a flight to check your property or
Did
anything.
you see?
And nobody's there to look at it, so you're trying to get your head around what is even happening. And then we had a crazy neighbor who decided to stay. So, but
Yo.
he doesn't have a way to communicate when the power's out or Wi-Fi, so you still have to wait. And then you don't wanna be like, hey, how's my house? You know, the poor guy's like,
He's got no windows, he's got like.
he
half-
takes on the brunt of everybody in the neighborhood all of a sudden.
Right.
And it's just a really hard thing, you know, and anybody that's had friends and family in this over the weekend, it's a long weekend, and it's still long because they're getting surges now. But you can't get localized information
It's
if you're
brutal.
not there.
Right.
They're just, and my parents were frustrated because they're over in Miami Beach still, and they're like, that's not even where it's going. Can you go to the West Coast?
Yeah, right.
But everybody likes Miami, so they wanna keep focusing on South Beach, because
Well-
people know where Miami is.
My-
They don't know little towns like Margot Island, and, you know, unless you are a Floridian, you're not familiar with those things. And even the Keys weren't getting play, because there's not a lot of people in the Keys. So it was interesting culturally.
They got slammed.
We go to those hot button, and then it was either Miami Beach, Fort Lauderdale because of the spring breakers, that's in Daytona, that's like the whole, and Disney World.
That's
Which
like,
isn't even near where the
that's like
issue
in
was.
Texas, like when,
Florida's a very big state.
that's like in Texas though, like when
It's
last
Houston the
hurricane-
entire time.
Yeah, they were Houston, and like,
Yeah.
there's 3 towns, like Beaumont, Corpus Christi, and like another one, and they're all, and like Port
And
Arthur's, like,
Louisiana,
completely
too.
underwater, yeah,
Ugh.
yeah.
And that's what I mean, it shows you an example of, because your news is always nationalized and and it's so sensational now, it goes automatically to places that only people will hear of. And, you know, sports teams there, and there's an arena there, and but if you are from a rural area, you don't get any play. And that has been an argument a lot, that urban versus rural, which one gets ignored sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's,
And they don't get heard and they don't get the supply. So I agree with you, it's very difficult. I think it's great with technology that you can like go to that news app of that town, luckily. You have those things, but then it can also, as I told my mother, stop looking at it.
Yeah.
Then you start obsessing.
oh my
Yeah.
God.
It's like so informative,
It's
but
like
then it's
neuroses.
too informative,
Right.
and now you become that crazy person of like, oh my god, there's trees down.
Is-
You see too much, and then it freaks you out.
Is this like y'all have like a summer home or like a winter home down there? or-
It's our second, yeah,
Oh, okay.
completely, it's a home, yeah, we don't rent it, we don't.
Okay, yeah,
Since
no.
I was, yeah,
Um,
so we all have keys and have
I know.
stake in it. And then you try not to be that person because, you know, for me, I'm like, lives are first, you have insurance, you know.
yeah, the house.
So
that
you're a
you're
human
building-
being, it's your home, so
Yeah.
it's tough.